Okay, thank you very much for joining us. We have here today with us Igor Zulaika, who is a friend of the Kurds from the Basque country on the Basque left, who's been following both obviously developments in the Basque country, but also across all of Spain and also with the Kurds for many years to talk to us about recent developments in Catalonia in particular. So thank you very much for agreeing to come and speak with us, Igor.
Thank you, Thomas. It's a pleasure for me.
Okay, so let me just ask you to give for our friends a little bit of a background to how it is that the Catalan Parliament has recently come to recognize the only parliament that has come to recognize the autonomy of the northeast of Syria, which is controlled by the Kurdish forces, how the Catalan Parliament came to recognize the autonomy of the Kurdish region.
So we will need to explain first a little bit of what has been going on during the last years in the Spanish state, because what has happened is that there is a pro-independence majority in the Catalan Parliament. That pro-independence majority is sustained by three parties: CUP, Candidaturas d'Unitat Popular, which is a left assembly-based movement, then Esquerra Republicana de Catalunya, which is the progressive pro-independence historical party, and then we have Junts per Catalunya, which is quite a new structure, quite a new political structure that brings in the tradition of what used to be the Catalan bourgeoisie, which used to be autonomist and has developed and changed to become a pro-independence bourgeoisie with quite progressive traits. So since 2013 and before, there has been an ongoing pro-independence process going in Catalonia that reached this peak in October in 2017, when there was a referendum that was promoted by Catalan institutions and forbidden by the Spanish government. So what has happened over the years is that people who thought they had a good enough situation inside the Spanish state has realized that for them and for the Catalan people, the only possible solution is to have their own state. That has provided a pro-independence majority in parliament. There has been several elections. The last elections last year were the first ones in which the pro-independence parties had both a majority of seats and also a majority of voters. So in that context, the CUP, the Candidaturas d'Unitat Popular, put forward a motion for the Catalan Parliament to recognize the autonomy of northeast of Syria, of what we here call normally Rojava. This was passed, and this was passed because there has been a political transition. This would have been unthinkable of 10, 15 years ago, when both CUP didn't stand for the parliament elections, Esquerra Republicana had a minority, and the main party used to be Convergencia y Unió, which was a mix of unionists and autonomists, which respected or which defended the interest of the Catalan bourgeoisie. The political changes, the transformation that there has been on the Catalan society has made possible a majority in parliament that has been able to approve this. And this is really meaningful step because it means that the parliament of a non-recognized nation, which has no right to self-determination, has been able to pass a motion to support the efforts that are going on in northeast Syria to build an autonomy there. And it could be a starting point for other similar symbolic gestures to be had in parliaments or other institutions around Europe. There is a problem, and the problem is quite obvious, is that the Catalan Parliament has no rights to put forward motions on international issues that have to be taken in by the Spanish government. The Spanish government doesn't have to respect what the Catalan Parliament has voted. But it's a good point to start showing our solidarity to the Kurdish friends and to the people the different peoples that live in northeast Syria.
Mm. Just one question with respect to the composition of the Catalan Parliament, with the people who are allied with Podemos, the En Común Podem. What was their position with respect to this motion?
The issue with En Común Podem and generally with the Spanish left is that they tend to be quite sympathetic to progressive and just causes that happen more than 3,000, 4,000 kilometers away. And then they have another position when it comes to local issues. So many times what they do is they take a position based upon the international situation they perceive and what is trendy on Twitter. And B, sometimes what they do is, okay, but if I say this regarding, and let's take this example out of the Kurdish situation, but if I say this regarding the situation in Myanmar, or if I say this regarding the situation in Colombia, then how would that be perceived by my own voters here? So sometimes their positions have more to do with how they are perceived here than about how they think or what they think should be the best position to have.
Complicated. Yeah. And with respect to the democratic confederal interpretation of self-determination that the Kurdish movement is pushing forward, is there anyone in the Catalan context, or for that matter in the Basque context, who are interested in this kind of democratic confederalist project as a reinterpretation of what self-determination can mean?
Yeah, okay. So the issue here is we live in Europe, we live inside the European Union, and our understanding is that having a state is a must to have a voice and be heard in Europe and in the international arena. We do receive messages of people who says, you could try to have a recognition inside the Spanish state, and you could try to build up. What happens is that in our case, what we understand is that there is no way the Spanish state can provide for the needs of our people. And we understand that our people needs to have all the tools in their hands to be able to play in the international arena. So some people here says, yeah, you see, if you could think as the Kurds and speak about this kind of democratical experiences, then there could be some ways out inside the Spanish state. And for that, that's a complete lie, because this is not a discussion about what do we want. Do we want to eat bananas, or do we want to eat rice, or do we want to eat pasta? There is people who keep saying, no, but let's go for the bananas. They are healthy and they are okay, and this would be the best way of doing it. But when you come to the table or to the kitchen, there is only rice or pasta. So sometimes this is put forward as a discussion of this could be the best way out for this. Yeah, this, of course, it could be. That could be a realistic or a nice approach to this situation we have, but it's unrealistic on the current situation, on the current composition of the Spanish elites and its bourgeoisie, on the interest of its capitalistic classes and the composition of its right-wing political parties. Then we are not in a situation to start thinking about such approaches. Our situation has far more to do with the need for us to build our own state structures using the autonomy they have given us, and to start little by little bridging the gap between what we want to be able to do and what we would be able to do as a state. So somehow, when people here looks at the Kurd example, we see an example of what we could do if we were in similar conditions as what the Kurds are. We don't say that's not the solution for Kurdish people. We respect it and we really evaluate it as such. But we believe that in our current context, it's not the best approach. Because we, as I said in the beginning, we live in a club of States, which is the European Union, that only respect state levels. And then we would need to be heard on that level too, and that would be impossible through a democratic confederalism as it's proposed by the courts.
Very interesting. So with respect to, you mentioned a little bit, talking about En Común Podem, or the followers of Podemos, the affiliated with Podemos, their contradictions with respect to recognition of the Kurdish movement. Could you talk a little bit more generally about why the Spanish government, which is a coalition government with the Socialist Party and Unidos Podemos, why it seems impossible for them to come to recognize the Kurdish autonomy?
Okay, so this is a complicated question that would need a really long interview to discuss. But what we have nowadays in the Spanish state is what we call the window of opportunity and a parenthesis. So the current government is the result of an unexpected no confidence motion that went up in and went positively. When the previous government of the Popular Party was accused and held responsible in court of embellishment of public funds, then someone thinking they were doing a political maneuver proposed no confidence motion. They didn't think they were going to win it, and they won it. So that opened the window of opportunity. That changed what we would say the plans of the state apparatus and the different apparatus of the state. And suddenly we found ourselves with the possibility of a different government. There was one election, then there was a repetition of the election. And for the first time since 1936, there was a government in Spain, a coalition government, on which a force to the left of the Labour Party, of the Partido Socialista, came into government. This, I mean, history shows us things. And, you know, it's not for the fact that it's the first time this happens since 1936 that this should be better, but this shows something. So this is the first time this happens. And it should allow us to discuss a number of issues. In the case of Basques, our party has proposed to speak about 3 different issues, and those are the things we want to speak with Madrid. 1 is the issue of prisoners, 2 is the issue of social rights, and 3 is the issue of national recognition and the national debate we have inside the Spanish state. On the first issue, we are speaking with them, and situation of our prisoners is slowly but steadily changing. On social rights, what we are asking them to do is to respect what they agreed upon as a government program. And on the third situation, the situation of nationalities in the Spanish state. What you need to understand when thinking about Spain is that Spain is a nation that never came to be. Spain, unlike France, wasn't able to homogenize its natural or its original population. So we have Basques, but we have Catalans also, and we have Galicians. And then there is mostly uniform feeling of Spaniardness that believes it's an attack against them. Whenever you do something with Basques or for Basques or Catalans, they understand it as an attack. So the current government has an open negotiation table with the Catalan government. They are discussing politically a way out of the crisis they have, the institutional crisis there is on the Spanish state. But it's really difficult for them to promote or propose any kind of solutions that don't fit the box of, you know, Spain is one and it's not 51. And Spain is a unity of destiny. And those are Franco's regime's anthems. But on the Spanish mindset, their own national identity is based upon those, you know, ideas of the dictatorship. So, long story short, what we have now is a government that wasn't expected, and what we have now is a divided ruling classes in the Spanish state. Some of them believe that the autonomous system they set up in 1978 went too far and it gave too many powers back to the autonomies. And that people is economically supporting the far-right party Vox and Popular Party for them to get into office as soon as possible. And then there is another part of the economical elites of the Spanish state that say, okay, but we do have a national problem. How can we resolve that national problem without breaking down Spain? And they don't have a clear proposal. So for the time being, what we have is a government that opens a window of opportunity because it's the most progressive government in the history of Spain. So if they are not able to resolve the national crisis, the national issue within the Spanish state, who's going to be able to do it? And our peoples, our populations, our neighbors who believe that there is a possible solution coming from Spain, they are going to find out, or we hope they are going to be able to see, that if even the most progressive government in the history of Spain isn't able to resolve it, then in our case, the best possible solution would be to go on as an independent state and start working towards that goal, because there is no way Spain is going to, fulfill the needs of our peoples.
Yeah, very interesting. So you referred to the situation of the Basque prisoners, and just for our audience, in the international discussion, while there was an armed conflict going on, the Basque question did get some attention. But in the last decade or so, most of the attention, if not all of the attention, has really been on Catalonia, and people don't really know very much about what's been happening in the Basque country. So could you give us a little bit of an update with respect to, particularly from the standpoint of the Basque left, what kinds of evolution has taken place in the Basque country since the end of the armed conflict?
So what's important to understand is that the end of the armed conflict in Basque country was a decision by the pro-independence left. What we understood was that the negotiated processes we had had until that point didn't allow us to go farther on and to make our base of support base broader and wider. So what we decided, and at some point it was a really complicated decision, was that we needed to go from a political and military strategy to an exclusively political strategy. And that's easily said, but that's complicated to do. In 2010 and 2011, we went through a process of triangulation with the international community. That meant the Basque movement, ETA on their hand, and the Basque political parties on their hand also spoke with the international community. And the international community spoke with the Spanish government. So in 2011, October 2011, ETA declared the definitive cessation of its armed activity. And then there was an understanding that there should have been a negotiation process, which never happened. So what we started to think was that the unilateral way, and meaning unilateral, is when you do things not regarding your opponent, but regarding your own society and regarding the international community, then we still could advance. Some people have called it clapping with only one hand, which is kind of really, really difficult, because if the other side doesn't want to clap, it's complicated. But what we understand that this is like a bicycle, so it's us who want to get to the finish line. The other side doesn't want, so it's us who need to keep working the bicycle so that it gets to wherever we want to go. What has happened during the last 10 years is that there has been a transformation in Basque society. We were declared illegal, our parties were declared illegal one after the other starting in 2003. Nowadays, our political coalition, which has brought in other political sectors in the Basque country, is the second political force in the country. We hold 21 out of 75 seats in the Basque Parliament, 28% of the popular vote. We are the biggest political force in terms of local councillors and mayors. We have 120 mayors. I think it's 1,200 elected representatives in local councils. And what has happened mainly is that we have gone through a process of detentionment as a movement. So whenever there was an armed struggle, that requires a huge tension inside the movement. And the last 10 years have shown, like a slow decrease. But we are again building up speed, and we are trying to get our society mobilized. Because the end of armed struggle and the fact that we are not anymore in the international media because there is no armed struggle doesn't mean that there isn't a people here who wants to achieve its objectives. And we've kept working towards that goal. And one of the things that has happened is that we reached no agreement with the Spanish state. So there was no release of prisoners. There was no agreed upon process to disarm ETA, for example. So ETA's disarmament had to be done through a Basque civil society. So one of the things we've been doing during all these years has been to rebuild social links, to rebuild our social base, and start growing stronger and stronger again. At the start of the process, we were in a huge amount of electoral popular support. Then when Podemos came in, they were the new thing, and so we had a number of bad elections. But since 2016, we grow from strength to strength in every election. And our aim would be to get as much institutional power as possible and keep building that momentum forward.
Very good, very interesting, very interesting. So with respect to, just to bring it back to the Kurdish question and the recognition of Kurdish autonomy, what do you foresee with respect to the future is in relationship to the Catalan Parliament's recognition? What kind of effects can the Catalan Parliament's recognition have across Europe?
It wouldn't have a technical automatical effect. So it's not like a state recognizing the Northeast Syria autonomy, but it's a starting point. And it's a starting point to be built upon. So as most of things in every struggle in the world, when you work things out and you put an effort into them, they can be used to. So the fact that the Catalan Parliament has been the first could be used to bring this issue to other parliaments and start knocking on doors and telling people, okay, the Catalans have done it. Why wouldn't? And I don't get me wrong. I don't want to pick which states you need to go and knock on, but why doesn't the Danish Parliament try to do something similar? Could Finland or other parts or other states in Europe think about this? And if they can't, maybe they can't recognize the whole autonomy because it would put them into bad footing with other actors that are in the ground and have interests there. But can Northeast Syria be defined as an actor? Someone to have relations with? So maybe you are not giving the autonomy of Northeast Syria full recognition, but you recognize that they exist there, that they are there, and that they can receive international funds for humanitarian aid, for example, and that they are a trusty ally to have on the ground when you need to resolve issues there. So I think that could be the use of this is, it shows an example. It can be done. It can be brought forward. You can have different parties supporting it, even ideologically different parties. And that can be used, whenever you go and knock on doors, for example, in our own Basque Parliament and tell them, okay, the Catalans have done it, why shouldn't we? Or going in Denmark and saying, you see, we know the Catalan Parliament is not as the Danish Parliament, but there has been a cross-party support for this issue. We understand it's important. And then European societies do have a quite good remembrance of, Rojava and the Kurds who fought against ISIS. Somehow it can be understood as a recognition for that struggle and for the people who struggled against, ISIS in the worst of times. So there should be some room for that work to be done and for those doors to be knocked in parliaments.
No, they're very eloquent, and hopefully we will see soon the Basque Parliament do the same thing that the Catalan Parliament has done, now that the Catalan Parliament has done it. Any last words for our audience?
Well, no, I mean, the only thing we can always say is that we live in a world that unfortunately works on interests and then on relations of power. And the only thing we can do is keep working and keep struggling to change those relations of power so that our peoples can be free. So thank you very much for having me and for this interview.
Thank you very much, Igor.